the knowledgeable, soon-to-be Dr. Osarenkhoe Ogbeide. Did I say that right?
Man, like,
Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
I should have asked that before, but yeah. With the recent Cambridge graduate Arjun Lotay, and the one, the only guy who's working for Brit Asia TV. Let's give it up for Gurdev Potiwal.
Man fully baited out my place at work.
Am I not allowed to do that?
Huh? Nah, you are. Just
All right.
I mean, if it's on LinkedIn, it's public knowledge. Like,
listen, next he's dropping your village, like.
It's not a link. I'm gonna get bare uncles now. Like, yo, can you introduce me to this one and that one? No. And that one and this one.
It's presented, huh?
Yeah. All right. So yeah, today we were going to be discussing two topics, if we can get to it. The first one being the value of debate, and the second one being discussing mindset bros. And I'll get into what that means if we get to it. So yeah, the value of debate. I just want to, before we start, I just want to ask you guys, how do you guys feel like you learn best? Like, what's the best way for you to learn something? Like a theoretical topic, let's say, like, just a subject wise, not really like a practical skill, but just more the theory behind one. If anyone just wants to jump in, time.
I'd have to say, just to do with, like, you're just talking about theory and stuff, like, if you're just more like, theoretical education and stuff. So I'd have to say, probably just, like, obviously I'm a bit of a buff in it. Well, obviously not like these two here. These two are, top notch and stuff in it. But, like, if someone's talking to me about certain information, it's just, I'd say just someone giving me the facts in, like, short, concise, like, maybe pop cards, like, obviously metaphorical pop cards. So obviously feeding me information like that, and then talking on it further and expanding, then that's, for me anyway, that's the best way for me to absorb information.
It's kind of like a lecture seminar, like someone gives a presentation or something, and then after you kind of delve into it a little bit. Yeah. So what about you guys, Ozzy and Arjun, being the academics you guys are?
God forbid, man. Listen, he's the one that's gonna be doctor, like. But no, like, I guess I've been used to obviously, like, sitting through, like, hour-long lectures and reading books and stuff. But honestly, in terms of, like, how I learn things, I've had to adapt to, obviously, like, to that style. But the best thing for me was either being explained to or explaining things. So when I used to, like, read things, I actually used to just sit there and just deep in, like, shit, man. And I'd, like, hit up one of my boys and be like, yo, this was this mad theory I checked out. Like, that, for me, just to be able to, like, put together all that information to be able to explain it to someone, I feel like for me that was the process of learning it, because it shows that I properly, like, internalize something. But I think that for me is the most important thing, of just having a conversation about something, having your questions answered, and also, like, being able to speak something out loud that you've picked up on. Because it's one thing to sort of, like, pick up on information or to come across something, but it's another to, like, actually learn it or understand it,
Ozzy, what about you?
For me, especially as a scientist, I think I can learn in any way. I think there's a way that I prefer learning, which is interactive. And a lot of science is that. For instance, when we think of science, it doesn't have to be in a lab. Like, even if you're, playing with a hose and you just pinch the tip at the end, that whole, the water shoots out faster at the end, you know that, right? So that whole phenomenon is governed by the equation called Bernoulli's equation, which is basically a fluid dynamics. It simply says you decrease the area, the velocity of the liquid shoots out faster to make sure that the energy is conserved at the beginning, the fluid inside the holes versus fluid outside the holes. And if you heard that, you saw this equation with, like, P plus PV. If you saw those numbers, you'll be like, okay, what is that? And if someone just went, squeeze this.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, snap, yeah, small area, faster fluid. Makes sense. Science. And it's like, a lot of science is like that, whether it be a combustion reaction or finding out what happens to snails if you put salt on them. And It's just
You guys
like,
are just out here committing genocide.
no. As a kid, when you find out, you're like, what? And all I did is make a little track for them to follow.
That's just terrible. I'm joking. Maybe not.
They say knowledge is power. And with great power comes great responsibility.
Random little caveat, like a random little question. Would you say, because a friend of mine who's a scientist actually said, whatever questions aren't answered by science wander into the realm of philosophy? And would you say that science and philosophy are quite tied together?
I mean, yeah, like a PhD literally means a doctor in philosophy, not a doctor in science. So
quick, easy answer. That's fine. Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah,
No, I just found it a really interesting thing because, like, I was like, especially at school, science was just what is facts. You like, and philosophy is asking questions, right? And like, as a kid growing up, science was never like that aspect of like science wasn't really shown to me until I did science, right? Like, actually did experiments and started thinking and had to speak to scientists, right? But yeah, no, and that kind of like runs me into this whole conversation I wanted to have with you guys was, what's the value of debate? Because recently I've seen a lot of my friends, especially with politics, like this is usually with politics. I rarely see it with any other subject, but they turn to learning from debates. And when I say learning, I'm saying they learn things from the debate. They don't use the debate to see who has the better idea. They actually learn new things from people speaking in the debates. And it just made me realize that I don't personally, and this is just my personal view, I don't think debate is a good medium to learn about something. I think debate has values, and I guess we'll go into that. But I think for the most part, debate, as I've seen in like different videos of like, oh, watch this guy destroy him with like, facts and logic. It's just war, right? No one's really, it's a game of chess. And the people who are engaged in it, it's just like an egotistical venture just to prove that I'm better than the other person. And I'm using my intellectual schlong to whack them over the head and just prove that I'm just superior in every way, right?
I just laughed because I for the life of me, I thought you were going to say intellectual prowess.
See, that's one of the tactics of debate. Throwing a wild card to throw your opponent off. Yeah, and now you're thinking about schlong instead of thinking about what I'm actually saying.
Just like, fair enough.
No, but yes, like I kind of wanted to say, like,
you're making some mad accusations right there.
it's just psychology, bro. How's that meat in your fridge?
Oh God. No, wait. We have to provide further context.
No context. New context needed.
Basically, he left his he left some uncooked meat in my fridge because he was going out within my area, so he thought I'd buy the meat, keep it at my friend's house, and then collect it later, but he forgot it.
I was on the M6 on the way back. I was like, oh fuck. So yeah, hope you enjoyed my meat.
I'm a pescatarian, bro. I'm a pescatarian, so it's not me.
No, you know what you should have done? You should have sent him a snap like when you got home of you having a barbecue.
With everyone, charging everyone.
Yeah.
Making a fat bag. Secure the bag. Come on. But yeah, going back to the point. So what to you is the value of debate, and like, how do you engage with it?
I mean, I think from your introduction to the topic, I think you described a very newish era of debate, right? So for instance, a lot of these videos where if you search up, this person debates that person, the clickbait title will happen where it's like, this person destroys, eviscerates, extinguishes this person. And it's like, they have this really hyperbolic title to draw you in. Most of the time, the person doesn't destroy or eviscerate the person in the debate. It's like, maybe they have one or two good points outside of what the other person said. But the debaters themselves are aware of this, and they are going to try to come into the debate with tactics that, from a entertainment and retention standpoint, make themselves stand out, whether it be by having the more, more kind of like flagrant opinion, or even portraying their opinion in a way that has more entertainment value than it does I'd say academic value. But when I think of debates, I think less of the new kind of debate, I'll say, that exists on YouTube right now and with speakers. And I think more of the debates possibly that were less popular or in smaller spaces, even going back to old videos on YouTube, watching Malcolm X on chat shows and debate shows, and he's essentially using logical reasoning to explain why the treatment of at that time his people was wrong, and you can see there was no clear way the other person could essentially defend against that. And I think something like that, you can learn from that, because you can learn composure, you can learn how to set up your points in logical order, because again, it was less, Malcolm X wasn't getting any AdSense back then, so there wasn't an incentive to be so flagrant on camera for the speakers of the debate. There was a much more kind of calm and, I would say, methodic approach to how he laid out his ideas, which I think you can learn from, and which is why his debates are still so highly viewed even today.
I can't lie. I agree with Ozzy, but I have a bit more of a negative view on it. I think debates become so cheap nowadays. The debate is like adult film star versus super religious person in a debate, and it's like people would watch that and just just clash on that. Look at Twitter now. Twitter is just one big debate. Do you know what I mean? And it's about the same old stuff all the time, and no one's really learning. Everyone just wants to see who's got the best diss, basically, because it'll go from the debate to personal, then they'll just see who's got the best diss on them, innit? So I think I agree with you, but I think it's just it has become a lot cheap, and a lot more cheap, because I feel like debate was before the internet and all the controversy and stuff and people capitalizing on it. I think debate was, if you was part of a debate team, you were saw as intelligent, you know what I'm saying? But nowadays it's just you see that all over Twitter, all on podcast, all on, just all over the internet, whatever platform it may be. So I think it has cheapened a little bit, I'm not gonna lie.
Nah, so I see what both of you guys are getting at, and especially about how you can have these really sort of impressive intellectual titans methodically explain their ideas, and I think debates can be a really good way. But Gurdev, I kind of I feel your kind of apprehension as well about how it can be used, and I think the question really is about what's the debate for? And I think for me that was just really interesting. Obviously, I studied the social sciences, right? And it was interesting what you were saying about kind of how you can see a lot more of what we know as science in terms of creating theories and coming to conclusions and having discussions about explaining phenomenon. And there's one thing I kind of came across when I was doing sociology, and it was this idea of pluriversality, of multiple ways of thinking both being equally true. And my first reaction was that can't be right, because we're sort of taught and we're socialized to believe there's one right answer to everything, and that one right answer will always rise to the top in any discussion. I think that's something that Hegel came up with. But when we think about debate and what it's being used for now, it's not about two intellectuals coming together to hash out ideas. It's not about learning or educating or using your platform as a way to explain something. It's drama, it's entertainment. And yeah, you're right, because it's on these platforms that are designed not for intellectualism, but for engagement, right? And that's how people thrive, that's people make money. But even back then, Gurdev was talking about debate teams in school. So many people used to try and come up to me, say, oh, you should join a debate team. I tried out for it. I went to a few sessions and stuff, and I hated it. Because the idea that you're turning discussion into a sport, you're learning to take a side you don't agree with just so you can flex your muscles and develop your skills. Don't get me wrong, it's probably important, and it probably has developed some incredible speakers. But just the idea that you're training kids to see arguments as some sort of intellectual chess game, you're just playing, you're running a simulation, when these are important things. I think that's where it got a bit really iffy for me, where the word debate, then I sort of would grip my teeth and cringe a little bit, and just thinking if you're performing a debate, if you're putting it on for people to see, if you're trying to have it where you can hash out ideas or put it on the internet or whatever, I feel like there's a really dodgy framing, especially with some, with certain ideas and certain things you might posit. I mean, some things just don't need to be debated. Like there's no need to put on debate being like, I don't know, do women deserve rights or some shit? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, I just feel like it's about the purpose and kind of what you're setting out to achieve. And I feel like sometimes a debate, like, or what someone might want to get out of a debate, can more easily be achieved by just like a seminar or a panel or a discussion. It doesn't have to be something inherently antagonistic, because I think it comes from this kind of way where we view like everything has to be hashed out, everything has to be frictious. But like one person can just say their piece, another person can just say their piece, and you can find the truth between it. I just feel like, I don't know, the debate is just something that it just always always comes up with a lot of mixed emotions for me.
No, I fully get what you're saying, because like there's multiple things you said that I fully just agree with. The point that you were saying that it doesn't need to be frictious in that. It reminds me of a documentary called Behind the Curve, which is about flat earthers. And in that there's I think I want to say he's German, but he's like European, like mainland European. And he was speaking about, instead of debate, instead of playing a chess game where I'm not even listening to you, I'm just listening to make my next point, right? So that I'm not technically listening to what you actually have to say. I'm plotting my next move. Instead, let's go explore together. Let's have a discourse. Let's have a conversation. Let's see where we agree, where we disagree, and why we disagree. What are the values and pros and cons and stuff like that. And the other thing I wanted to say was, I think my issue with debate comes down to, and I think it's Arjun, you just says, what's the debate for? And I think that's what it is determining whether or not the people engaged in the debate are just serving their own egos, or if they genuinely want to uncover the truth, or they genuinely want to learn a new position. Are they in it to learn something new themselves? And I think a great example of this would be a friend of mine, and I really hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but he had to debate and justify why Dyer was right to commit the Jallianwala Bagh massacre that killed thousands of people, and he won. And this is a guy who wrote his, like, he is not that position, for him to be able to win, or like make a good enough argument to be seen as, and the language around debate is wrong in my opinion. How can you win this, right? It's that's the point I'm trying to make. How can you not believe in something that you're saying and still win, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is why I think that when people, especially when it comes to politics and economics and like, oh, does the free market provide over, and do we need socialism versus free market? I think all of that, it's not a great medium to have a discussion. That's not me saying that debate doesn't have any value. I'm saying certain kinds of debates need to really be checked, I think, personally.
It's like, when you're in an argument and like someone stumps you and you're wrong, but you have to double down anyway. You just have to commit, and I think like what's the point of all of that, And I think again it comes from that notion where like we always feel like we have to have the conclusion, you know what I mean? Like again, it's that Hegelian dialectic. There needs to be a thesis, a counter thesis, and a synthesis. But like not really. Sometimes two people can have an argument and they can both be wrong, or they can both be right. And like it's just this idea that we have to like tie it all in a little bow. And like the thing is, and the weird thing is, like all of our political systems are built on this idea. Every parliamentary debate comes from, okay, you got these many yeses and this many no's, and we're gonna and then we're gonna do this thing or not do this thing. Like that's how decisions are made. And we keep having this binary thinking, like, and this approach that just like everything has to boil down to someone being right. And I just feel like I feel like with that, I don't know what you can replace that with, but I feel like we need to destabilize that notion, or at least look in debates and understand like that's a false framing,
I mean, just chiming in, I think I see what you're making, but I think there's also the reality of, especially when it comes to governance, right? Whatever is decided you need to have something that's actionable. Mm-hmm. And I do think you're right to make the distinction in terms of not everything needs to be a debate. Some things can be a discussion, because the difference between a debate and discussion, which I think we can all agree with, is that a debate is to win. A discussion is to find the truth. So discussions can take a long period of time. Discussions in science take a long period of time. And there's, researching, there's looking into it, there's looking at different sides and stuff like that. And the hope of that is to come to an answer that's as close to true as possible. obviously, if we're talking more about politics and stuff and what to do there. Let's say if there was a discussion around like, I don't know, affordable housing and stuff like that, and the merits of that, you would hope that that discussion would then lead to something that is actionable, close to true, and beneficial for the people. But if you had that kind of discussion as a debate, that the issue, if let's say the close to true answer is addressing the housing situation, especially like in London. The goal of a debate on that issue isn't to address the issue. It's how can I advance what I believe in? If I have a lot of property and I want to make sure that my stuff gets the most money, I want to go for maybe saying, hey, if they can't afford London, maybe they should leave. No, literally. That's you'll see a lot of people in these debates have those interests, and that's why it's like it's hard to watch Parliament, see someone talk about this issue when it's like you're director of this property company. You want this to happen because you make money. I think there are times when I was actually remembering what you said about debate in school and how they trained essentially people discussing into a sport, and where there's a clear winner and loser. I think you need to look at the debate almost like martial arts, where that is the martial art of the verbal realm. So it's something that you should be good at doing if something you believe in or your rights are being infringed on, so that you know the tactics they will use, and you also know the responsibility that comes with being able to convince someone. So as Abby said, with his friend that wasn't of an opinion, but still managed to win it, he's probably sitting there in shock, just like, with great power comes great responsibility. Because if I can convince this arena of people, maybe I can do it on TV. Maybe I can do it on the bigger stage. And it's having people that know how to do that to defend against someone that actually believes that. Because I don't think everything is up for debate, but we also have to believe that not everyone believes that. So there are going to be some people that, may debate something for fun. There's going to be other people that have that opinion. And it's like, how do you then civilly contend with that person? And that will be with a clash of ideas, aka debate.
For sure. And I think that raises a really interesting point. And this is specifically with the political part of things, is that person was able to justify a massacre to people, right? And this is how we get continued wars in areas of the world that don't affect us. That's why the Middle East is a mess. That's why we have coup d'etats in South America of democratically elected leaders. We place the value of people's lives against the value of someone's words. It all comes, and we'll probably keep repeating the same points in that, but it all comes back to what's up for debate. I can watch a conversation or a debate between a physicist and a flat earther, and I obviously, I'll say it, I back the physicist. I've seen too many arguments, I've seen too many experiments that kind of back the round earth theory. And I think the issue with the other side, one side, no matter what you say to them, no matter what you put in front of them, they won't budge. Yeah. They'll question your theories, they'll question your evidences, and at that point, what's the point in having that conversation? I feel like we put too much value on, and this comes back to our politics as well, we put too much value on who's saying what, the person, rather than what they're saying.
I was saying this earlier because obviously at work we was discussing about like when people are put in the public eye, it's all about how they're saying what they're saying rather than the message itself. It's never ever about what they're saying. It's always about how they're delivering it and how they make themselves come across to the people they're conveying the message to. And I feel like that's a lot with social media nowadays. And I was saying that like the packaging of the message is so much more important than the message itself, basically. And then I feel like that's so much more consistent nowadays across the board.
I mean, that's where, especially with the format of the debate being there is a winner and loser, other factors come into it, which further affects the element, the idea of getting truth in a debate. Because as I said, discussion is about finding the truth, debate is about winners and losers. So you know, if some public speaker with a platform is having a debate with a lesser known public speaker, or, you know, let's say a civilian, people tune in and want to see what the public speaker has to say. So from the get-go, they're more actively listening to one of the two people. That kind of leverage in a format where you're bouncing ideas off each other already is unfair. It's like in a 100-meter race, someone starting 10 meters early. So even although I think you can learn from debates, there also has to be a consciousness of who you're getting to debate, such that you lessen that effect as much. And that's why you mainly see debates between, as you say, but as people say, people of the same like level. So it's like, here, let's get these, whether it be a student debate and it's just two students, or let's get these, you know, intellectual heads to go ahead, you know, to debate this topic. And that's why topics that are nonsensical, people tune in for a debate like that for the entertainment value. People, you know, I haven't seen any serious debate between like a card-holding academic and a flat earther. I've seen maybe some, you know, debunk videos, which is kind of like a weird video form debate where you watch one video, you watch the video, and you go back and forth, but not a sit down on, because as the old saying goes, arguing with a fool, you will always lose. Like, there's no point to, although even if you had a platform you came in, well, actually no, the academics, they don't have a platform, so it's slightly different. Because I feel like if someone like, let's say, Bill Nye the Science Guy and random flat earther 132 on YouTube were debating, people would, at the end of it, listen to what Bill Nye was saying. But again, if you just put two people with the same profile up there, let's say, with obviously different expertise, the more theatrical point or passion that comes from one side may win the other person, may win the audience view over. So even if you were sure the earth was round, you'll leave being like, but is it though? Is it?
Well, it's called a horizon for a reason. I'm not gonna lie. That one gave me, I was like, I was like, okay, you got me there. No, but
all it takes is a seed of doubt. Yeah?
bro. Nah, there is a debate where scientists sat down and an interesting point you made about them having equal platform. I didn't know these people before it was a Jubilee video, Middle Ground, and it was a really heated one. But the interesting thing was, and this comes back to the behind the curve, because a lot of this conversation that like a lot of this is internal dialogue I've had with myself, like since watching this documentary. I really do recommend it, because like it's a very interesting documentary just about how to communicate with someone. I think that's what it's not about flat earthers. It's about how do you want to talk to these people? How do these people want to talk to you? And it was interesting because in that there's two people. One person's talking about deconstructing the scientific superiority complex. And the second guy says a friend of his told him that sometimes when someone is not getting something, the only way to deal with that is to shame them. And he says, I don't think that's ever the answer. I don't think that's ever the last resort. It's like saying to a child in a class, the reason they don't get a subject is not your fault as their teacher, it's their fault. He goes, I don't agree with that one bit. You just haven't developed your compassion enough to see where they're getting stuck, or your empathy. You haven't developed your empathy enough to see where they're getting stuck. And I think that was a very important point, because I think that, and that's not just applicable with science or physics or like, you know, the STEM style conversation. I think that's also applicable to conservatives who talk about racism. And I'll say that because, I'm not a conservative and I am anti-racist. It exists. It's not a boogeyman. And it's interesting because it's like, how do you want to deal with these people? Now, I know that most people would turn around and say it's not the job of someone who's from an oppressed demographic to then educate the people upholding the oppression. And I agree with that. It's not your job. You shouldn't have to debate someone to prove you have a right to exist the way you are. And that all came off of, I think, in the BLM protest that happened last year, or Charlottesville, maybe. A Nazi was given a hug by a Black teacher. He goes, in that moment, and the teacher was like, in that moment, I could have punched him. I could have hit him, I could have done whatever. He goes, but something in me just told me he needed some love. And he asked him, why the fuck don't you like me? And when he hugged him, the Nazi responds, I don't know. And it's a nice thought because I think it works with a certain segment of those kinds of people. It won't work with all of them. So I think my personal position on this is some Nazis you just gotta punch. Other Nazis, yeah, you can give them a hug. Maybe it'll work. But then how do you say that to someone who's trying to kill you? Like, and you're the victim of those crimes. Like, I think expecting it from the oppressed peoples is the wrong way to go about it. But I also see the value in what the guy is saying in terms of de-radicalizing someone. Like, I think who's the musician? Daryl Davis.
Yeah.
Taken, what is it? Something like over 200 members of the KKK have given him their robes. No one can deny that's a very significant achievement to accomplish as a black man in America. He grew up. He grew up in the 60s, right?
Yeah, grew up under segregation.
Under segregation, right? Like, that's insane. Like, if you think about it, the KKK was mad active back then. I don't know how active they are now, but they would have been mad active back then. So for someone like him to have accomplished that is an incredible feat. But I don't think every KKK member will accept it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you're saying there. Like, and like you always get these like real feel good stories, and it's also really interesting how in a conversation about the value of debate, we've already jumped to talking about extremism, and I think it's obviously a very important thing to mention, right? And I think with just kind of as a side, just touching on what you were saying, I think when it comes to that, like engaging with people who hold extremist views or views hostile to your existence, I think like that whole sort of hug a Nazi thing, like obviously like listen, Nazis are getting punched around me, like there's no, I'm not putting myself in that fire. It's not my job to do, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I think rather than individualize that and being like, oh, gotta go hug every guy with a neo-Nazi tattoo, but I think it's about the idea that people fall into these extreme ideologies because of a feeling of insecurity. And I think when you look at it from a systemic way, like obviously it makes sense, but like you can't individualize that and you can't put it into a one-on-one. You can't have one guy representing like a whole school of thought or an idea. And I think going back to debate, you mentioned how Jubilee has a segment called the middle ground. I assuming that like you're looking at it from an objective where you're bringing together the two sides, right? I think again though, when we're looking about who's debating, we also need to look about like what's the framing of it all. Are we assuming there's a middle ground between someone who believes the earth is round and someone who believes the earth is flat? Is there some objective observer, right? It's just, can you be objective in that scenario? What is the middle ground? And I think some debates can often shift that position and it can be quite sneaky in the way they're doing it. Like when you have a discussion with a normal person and a Nazi, you've already implied that the middle ground is somewhere between, you know, and in that case, a Nazi's won because anything that pushing someone to that rightwards is something in the Nazis' favor.
It's a step in their direction.
Yeah, like it's the power dynamics of it all. And especially when you're talking about like people from marginalized backgrounds, already they're dealing with so many barriers to get there. You know what I mean? They might be dealing with some sort of stereotypes, if you're talking about a public debate, or there might be an inequality of resources or something similar. Like that person's already in a losing position. So when that power dynamic skewed, like the debate was already in someone's hands, you know? And I think just going back then to what Ozzy was saying about like debate being a martial art, like I agree with you. Like I like debating and I like discussions and I could talk for England. Like I'm not saying that there's no merit in it. And I think there is value in teaching oneself and having discussions. But I think when that then transfers into like a competitive setting or when it transfers into a public setting and you're making a statement saying we're debating these ideas like as a means to come to a conclusion, the dramatic elements of it all are still there. And I think that has some quite shady ramifications, especially when the power dynamics can be skewed, you know, because so that's why like I'm still kind of skeptical. But yeah, like in a vacuum, like if you two just want to hash out an idea, or if you want to talk about what color the dress is, or like you want to develop that skill set of discussing one's ideas, I think that's obviously really important. But I think there needs to be self-awareness in the people debating. Otherwise, you're gonna have two white dudes on a YouTube channel or on a Twitch debating whether the black people should exist or not. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think it's just really shady. So I think it's just Yeah, this seems to be a sort
even
of
when
awareness there.
even when the white dudes are spitting facts and they're from our side of things, I think they also miss things as well, because
Mm.
I think there's no such thing. I think who said it? Who said it? I think it was Akala. There's no such thing as objectivity. A lot of people
Mhm.
in like politics and like academics, that if you want to know the position of someone who's grown up in York in 1990s, go speak to that person. Don't speak to someone who's studied and read some books and that. And I think even outside the academic sphere, people say those kind of things, that you want to have the representation of those views. Going back to what you said about, and I think a really good word to use is legitimize. I feel like when you put a Nazi in the room with someone who's anti-fascist, which should be everyone's default position, let's just be honest, you kind of legitimate, you kind of show it's kind of like when people do it with like climate change and climate change deniers. You're kind of making it out as though those two positions, and I think I might just be repeating what you said, but it's a very important point to what I'm about to say, is you're making these two positions the same. Well, people who aren't from those backgrounds, people who aren't educated in it, people who haven't studied, this issue and that. And it all, for me, it all comes back to politics and that. That's what most politics comes down to, especially in these kinds of things. Like, oh, what's the compromise? What's the middle ground? What's the compromise that we can say to someone who's had police brutality their entire life? They've been dealing with getting randomly selected, and they've been dealing with stop and search their entire life, and then being criminalized, and then having less investment in their neighborhoods. Well, what's the middle ground that you say to that person when the other person says they deserve that? Because that's essentially what they're saying. You deserve that. That's your position in society. Don't you dare try and get out of it.
No, 100%. Like Aussie, Gurdev, have you guys heard of the term the Overton window?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
I haven't had that term. You need to
The
jump
Overton
into it.
window. So it's another sort of political science term. It just kind of talks about like the window in which like ideas are deemed acceptable. And it's this kind of idea that like that shifts over time. Like, in terms of politics, it can shift left, it can shift right. And like when you platform certain ideas, you can often shift that idea of what is considered acceptable. And especially like in a debate format, like if you're platforming a Nazi and implying that like there is some validity argument, you've already shifted the window of what you've deemed as acceptable. And I think that's a really interesting concept in terms of like when you bring in this idea of debate of who's debating, what you're trying to say with it, and especially if they're on equal footing, like what does that say about the ideas in question here? And it's about shifting what we deem as like acceptable or not.
That's the danger of debate, because as you said, by the nature of having this battle of ideas is that you, in a sense, give them equal footing in this arena. So in this arena where you're battling out ideas, you've given one side the same respect as you've given another side. So if that was to come, if we're debating stuff like, should we force kids to work? Like we've now, the way your eyes look left and right, into the capitalistic nature. Like, well, we do have labor shortages after Brexit. So.
that chimney needs sweeping, you know.
You fit in that chimney. You fit.
My chimney hasn't been cleaned in a very good time. So, which I know. Hold on.
I would build a chimney in my house just to make a kid work. I don't even have a chimney, but I'll build one.
But you know what I mean, like, and as to tie in with what Arjun said, having a debate like that shifts what's acceptable, because you've given someone that doesn't think child labor is acceptable, you've given them the same respect as you have with someone that does believe it. But here's the tricky thing is, I was gonna say 2-4 now. The tricky thing is how do you manage what debates you can have with free speech? Because we can talk about the clear examples, whether it be anti-racism, extremist opinions, or kids cleaning chimneys, to say, look, these are clear examples where debate is the best format. But what about the unknowns? For instance, let's talk about the whole COVID vaccine. People want to debate that a lot because there's a lot of unknowns go around it. And as someone that's taken the vaccine, I am not mad at all by those that wish to debate it, because there's also the concerning behavior of governments along this vaccine, whether it be the idea that we may need extra shots from, I think Pfizer looking at possibly giving out boosters, and that was always going to be the case. But
Moderna was going to give a third shot, I think, for winter.
Yeah, but from a company perspective, there's an incentive for that to happen. And it's like, how are you managing that incentive with the actual efficacy of the vaccine? There's also the limitations that people are well in their rights to bring up, like a vaccine passport for entrances into clubs, education, and it's not that the idea is wrong. Like, if you take out, emotion, and if you will, I was gonna say take out rights from it, which is what is the fear. That makes sense because you want to limit areas where people will congregate to limit the spread of the virus. However, there's also the fear people have of government overreach and control, and also limiting people's freedoms. Because if you're saying, oh, you can't live on college, you can't live in halls if you're not vaccinated, that affects, hundreds of thousands of millions of kids. At least in the UK it is. I know they're thinking of doing the same thing in America. To kind of culminate my point, figuring out what is for debate and pairing that with free speech is the challenge we face in with all these discussions, basically.
I think definitely 100%. I promised myself I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to be a prick. It's funny to me that a lot of the people who are like, and it's usually my conservative free market friends, and I'm going to keep bashing them because I'm like, yeah, let me get these guys, who talk about COVID vaccine passports being bad. And I'm like, oh, interesting that we now think passports are a bad idea. Oh, are you saying passports infringe on the rights of people? Anyway, I think the issue is this. It's determining whether or not, whether or not the concerns are valid. And I think there is so much misinformation. And I think this is the problem of an unregulated social media, essentially. And it is a problem. How do we regulate this thing? Because right now, private corporations have complete control over what's going on their platforms. Twitter banning people left, right, and center, and Facebook and Instagram censoring the farmers' protest in India, for example. But then, do we want the government to have control? It's the government in India. It's the government that in India that's imposing these bills. So, do we want them to choose? My issue is, I think this is the product of a system designed to not empower people. And I think the issue is you have numerous people that are, and I think this is the thing, and this comes back to the debate point of view, that people who are pro-vaccine, who have taken the vaccines, who get really passionate and mad, especially when they're frontline workers. Because I remember one of my friends who's a pharmacist said, when someone tells me they're not taking the vaccine, they're telling me that my life doesn't matter. I'm the one that every day is dealing with this.
Not necessarily true, bro.
But that's it. But again, you can say that, but that's his perspective. He's the one. We're sitting at home. He's the one there fighting COVID. A number of my medical professional friends have caught COVID. Some of them have colleagues that have died. I know some, and this is the issue. We need to, and I can fully understand that their emotion behind this. And I really hate it when someone says, take the emotion out of it, be objective, be this. Something like this is emotional. You need the emotion into to get to the point of view, because when most people that I know that are anti-vax, they're not anti-vaccine. They took their MMR shots. They took the shots as kids. They're anti this one because they're afraid there hasn't been enough time passed since it was developed to know what the effects are. And that's a fear. That's, for me, I'm not someone who's literate. I'm not a virologist. I don't know how this shit works. Yeah, I back the vaccine, but I can understand someone's fear and reluctance. And I would want to see, and I think this is how I would approach the answer to your question, Ozzy, I would want to see that person approached with compassion and kindness and education. Show them why it's safe. Show them why it's been approved. Show them why it's being rolled out, rather than shouting at them and berating them, and then them shouting back. Because that's all. And I guess that's my point is about debate, is that this is not the place to have the debate. This is not a topic that I think you would want to have a debate about. It's more a discussion, because at that point, it's not about winning. It's about what's the truth.
To be honest, bro, it's on like the people that control the environment as well. Like, for example, like my cousin's friend, she's like, I don't know what the correct job role title is, but she like works in a vaccine lab, and she said like the government countries have been working on a coronavirus, not a COVID-19, but a coronavirus vaccine for a long time, because coronavirus is the umbrella, and then COVID is the variant that's made everything go mad. They just accelerated those trials. But then there's also people I know that work for the NHS that are medical professionals who don't want to take it, who haven't taken it because of those very same apprehensions. Do you know what I mean? So it's
But
like,
I think, go on.
No. So it's like, I think, like you said, it needs to be a debate, not a discussion. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, I feel like
It needs to be a discussion, not a debate. Other way around.
Yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah. People are drawing, like your friend who said that, oh, I feel like you're being selfish. You're not thinking about my life. When in actuality, they're just thinking about what makes sense to them. They're not being selfish. They're thinking about what makes sense to them rather than thinking, I don't care about everyone else's life. Which there are people out there that do. There are people out there, oh, if you die, you die. That's you. That's on you. That's not my fault. There are people out there that do think like that. I'm not saying that. But do you know what I mean?
Oh, here's the thing. I think it's too complex to say
yes or no, 1 or 0 in it.
Whether or not things should be a complete discussion or there should be a debate. I feel like, some things should be a discussion in terms of the rollout of the vaccine. I feel like there's no point in having a debate as to whether or not you roll out the vaccine. That is the solution that's the best solution we have for getting back to normal.
Yeah.
Things that could be up for debate that are still related to COVID could be how it affects employment and liberties, right? Because, for instance, if you're in the medical field and you're saying, I don't want to take the vaccine, what does that mean? Does that mean you don't want to take the vaccine ever? Does that mean you don't want to take the vaccine now? Should you still be allowed to live your, work your job like that? And if we do have this also has to be contextualized. If we did a survey and there were like 30% of medical professionals, doctors, nurses, what have you, want to wait an extra year to take the vaccine, we don't have the leverage to say, oh, well, they should all lose their job and we'll find new ones. Like, if we do that, that's worse than COVID. Like, we will have hospitals filled to the brim, or we'll just be so understaffed. So I think there's certain, and how to put it? I think those aspects could be up for debate because there may be alternate, ideas and ways depending on how free thinking everyone wants to be about what we can do here with the virus. So if someone that's unvaccinated and they want to still exist and participate in social activities, how, if they don't want to subscribe to a vaccine passport, how else do they, what do we do to resolve that? Do we have a city where we have all the unvaccinated and we go, look, you can do anything you like there? Or do we even have designated areas where it's like, this club, given that people have concerns, this club right here is, for people that are unvaccinated and they can go for it.
That's segregation, bro.
Unvaccinated people at the back of the bus.
No, but
That's
but that's the thing. Like it is segregation. I can't deny that. It's like it. How do I put it?
In a sense, it's almost for their own good, though, right? Because
no, but like if you don't have the passport, how else do you achieve the goal? Because I remember seeing someone. It was a meme. It was quite funny. It's kind of like the guy was clearly making fun of people that don't want a vaccine passport. And I do feel like you should be apprehensive about any type of government overreach. But it was kind of like, what? They want to get a vaccine passport? You mean like the age passport to start drinking, or the driving passport to get in a car? And it's like just listing all the other areas of society where we have to prove something before we can take part.
I think like obviously with COVID right now and about how governments act, like obviously there are valid critiques and counterpoints to bring up, but I still think like turning things into a debate can still be really, really harmful, especially when you're bringing people who are saying, okay, we don't know the facts, and then are looking at like WhatsApp conspiracies. You know what I mean? Like there's still a inequality of information there. But I think especially in this case, I think it's also really important to talk about. We're talking about a temporary scenario, but with permanent precedents. You know what I mean? Something like a vaccine passport might be used for good now, but also later on. Yeah, there are questions like that, right? I mean, I'm someone who's got both vaccinations, right? But I also think like it's the whole thing though. But like when you turn it into a debate, you've almost cut off all these things and put them in a vacuum, because you're talking about vaccine passports, talking about COVID, but then you kind of divorce it from the wider conversation of we live in a system where healthcare is privatized and people make money off of vaccines. You know what I mean?
or the fact that certain
Yeah.
sections of society are omitted from that healthcare.
Yeah, or there are healthcare
excluded.
droughts, or or people feel uncomfortable for other reasons. I mean, I think like that needs to all be brought into the conversation. But when you're making it about like a anti-vax versus I don't know what pro-vax debate, you know what I mean? Like it still cuts off a lot of really, really vital conversations that need to be brought into it. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of context that gets locked off when it becomes a sort of cultural issue that people bound back and forth about. And I think that's really, really interesting to think about, like in the grand scheme of things as well. I mean, Ari, COVID, again, we're talking about how to deal with a temporary situation, but then the choices we make now are going to get brought up further again and again and again down the line. So I think, but then again, like, is that a debate where we're implying there's two valid approaches that need to be hashed out? Or is it more about, okay, as a society, we're making a decision, here's an approach, and and here are concerns from certain people or a perspective from other people. Like, I think, how are we framing it still? And I think because we get people who again are military anti-vax for what reason? You know what I mean? Just because they want to be skeptical, or just because they want to stick two fingers up to the government? Like, what are their reasons? Is it because they have genuine fears, or is it because they will finally want to exercise these freedoms they've just learned about? You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of where, like, when I'm thinking about everything here, like, I feel like anti-vaxxers can be really, really reckless. Like, okay, if you want to be a big man and firm it without anything, but the fact that you're announcing that to the world, I feel like you're putting someone else at risk, because now you're giving someone else the idea that they can do the same. And I think that is also really dangerous when we're talking about doing things in the public sense. So, which is why I get why people, when I get why like Twitter or YouTube or whatever, will post like warning saying this may not be true, or this, it's still important to get your jabs or whatever. Like, I don't find that crossing a line, but I think at the same time, it's the idea of like, what are we turning into a debate, and what are we doing by turning something into a debate? And I think that's a really interesting question, especially over COVID.
Yeah, actually, based on what you just said, I think I want to edit my point. I do feel like, yeah, it probably shouldn't. Yeah, probably even the extra elements to how we deal with this pandemic should be discussions. It shouldn't be debates, because, as I said, if you think of what the purpose of each is, this isn't a win or lose situation. It's how do we get to the source of truth? So yeah, that's what
I mean, I kind of like brain corrected your point to think that's what you meant in the first place. But yeah,
I meant that sentiment, but I feel like by using the word debate, I was basically
exactly, and I think that
an idea, like, it's okay to challenge an idea and maybe come up with a new one, but coming up with a new one isn't the purpose of the debate. The purpose of the debate is to shut down that idea and then win.
Well,
Alternative facts, bro.
Exterminate one and champion another,
this was the point I was going to make just now for the cuff of that is I think one of the limitations of debate as well is you man can't even agree on definitions. I can't for the life of me agree with and I'm going to do it again, my free market capitalist friend's definition of capitalism, because he completely like ignores the last 5 centuries of transatlantic slavery, of racialized violence and corporate authoritarianism and exploitation of the earth, of people, of the workers and laborers. And that to me is a major limitation of debate, because who then dictates that? They then have the advantage of the debate. They then have the advantage of the conversation. It's kind of like, sorry, Arjun, what was that concept you were talking about? The window?
The Overton window.
The Overton window. Kind of like how that shifts the center, that shifts the needle to them. If I now have to debate with you on your definition of what X means, but I think X means Y, I've automatically stepped outside towards you, right? And that may not be a valid thing to do because you may genuinely be wrong, but because you're using a different definition than we haven't defined what we're talking about, we're going to keep going around in circles. We're going to keep going around in circles. You're not going to accept what I'm saying. I'm not going to accept what you're saying. And that's because we're not grounded in reality. And that speaks to what Arjun said just then. You take away the context of these very complex issues and you just have a yes-no conversation about it, or a yes-no debate about it. And I think that to me is why whatever value debate has, I like the examples you gave. Is it a blue dress or is it a yellow dress? That's a great example to have a debate about. But why the frick are we debating about whether or not, I don't know.
It's in chimneys.
Yeah, we're not debating about that. I'm like, why are we debating on whether Black Lives Matter? I was gonna try it because I'm trying not to antagonize people who disagree with me, but I can't help it, can I? I'm sorry. Someone says Black Lives Matter, you're like,
no.
Nah, son, I disagree. Nah, son, I disagree.
You need to start with Black Lives existing.
This is my point.
You can't just jump to matter.
I have some thoughts about that one. I have some concerns.
You know what I mean? Like, whoa now.
What does matter mean? What does it mean?
Define matter.
What do I have to say? It's like that video, Ozzy, you sent it in the group chat of Bill Maher talking to Ben Shapiro and who's the other guy? Malcolm Nance.
Yeah, I was just checking the group chat right now.
Yeah, Malcolm Nance. In that, it was great, but like you saw it with Bill Nye. He's like, oh, what does critical race theory mean? Does it mean I now have to apologize for what happened to your great granddad? Because I didn't do that to your great granddad. It's like, no, but you benefit from what happened to his great granddad. You still benefit. It's very and what I love is people say, oh, people who back these kind of theories and these kinds of politics, they don't like logic. They don't like facts. Facts don't care about your feelings, innit? But I've started coining a term: conservative feelings don't care about facts. And I think, and yeah, it may not be objective and stuff, but I'm talking specifically about someone like Ben Shapiro, who says that people who are threatened by low-lying areas of being flooded by rising sea levels should just sell their houses and move. It's flawed. It's just flawed logics and flawed conversations that we're having right now.
It also shows a lack of, how can I put it? A lack of understanding of what the real issue is. Surely you want the area that's being flooded to not be flooded. Like, surely that's the concern, not the people living there. Like, as if you care about the earth and how your ecosystem looks like.
I've got the answer. Fuck them kids.
I mean, that's that comes down to it. It's kind of like,
I mean, that's what came down to in the UK.
If you're gonna complain, learn how to swim. Right?
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You know what that happened when we were talking about freaking should kids starve in the UK? In a richer country, should children be fed? Nah, the parents should be feeding them. Well, the parents can't. What happens now? You just got hungry kids. You got starving kids. You got malnourished kids in a rich ass country. Like that. That's the other point in terms of debate is that if think about it this way. I get the point. I get the points that I think it was Sadhguru who said if you only have 2 bedrooms, you should only have 2 kids. I think I may be doing libel here or slander.
I've never heard of bunk beds.
I need to.
I was like,
Well-
I've never heard of a bunk bed.
well, and it's that kind of thinking where it's like, well, you should have thought about having 5 kids when you realize you can't afford them. But it's like, all right, I get your point. Let's assume you're right. They should have wrapped it. They should have. But with your point, that kid now starves. That's not the problem. The kid exists.
Oh my God.
The child exists, and the child
Personal
is hungry.
responsibilities are myth because it also just like assumes that people aren't dealing with shit. You know what I mean? Like,
That is true. You know, actually, no, I can't say that because I was actually having this discussion about should be a sympathetic approach to the problem.
Mhm.
However, personal responsibility still comes into it if you then want to leverage the problem exists and essentially blame it on other people or not accept that you had something to do with that. So in the day, dating's more lighthearted. And I say, yeah, you chose who to deal with, but in the same way, like let's say there's someone that could afford to have 5 kids comfortably, big house, COVID, they lose their job and their business, and now they're struggling, and they have kids to feed.
Oh, true, man.
You can say, "Oh, you should have thought about those 5 kids," which they did. That's why they had the business. But if something out of nowhere knocks them off their feet, how do we resolve this thing? You can't just say it is what it is.
Here's my problem with this thinking is what does that solve? Right now, yeah, we agree. The person who had a business had the 5 bedrooms in the house. You know, like Tupac said, if you only got 2 kids, can you keep 2 fucking rooms? Yeah, and then they lose it. Yeah, cool. We exempt them from this. But someone who's been poor, they've been broke, they've never had that, but they just have 5 kids, right? What does telling them you should have thought about that before you did it solve? It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't serve anything. Those kids are still going to suffer. If you want to deal with the suffering of the children, telling the mother and the father, yo, you should have wrapped it. You were silly. You didn't wrap your willy. That is only solving your own ego again, right?
I think you need to do both though.
You can do it. It depends on what. It depends on this. Are we in a situation where, as you're helping them, you're giving them the bags, you're giving them the food, you're giving them the money to deal with all this, and they're still procreating? Then you're like, all right, yo. All right, hey. Here's some condoms. Hey, I'm not saying I won't have sex. Just please, no more kids. I gotta help other people.
Think about it this way: if your parent was going to help you out, right, with an issue you had, especially if they thought it was dumb, would they not help you out but chastise you at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like
for sure, but you
need to learn from the moment.
But the thing is, we're not doing both. But the thing is, but that's my problem. We're not doing both. We're doing one and not the other. We have starving children in the UK. We pay taxes. You normally pay taxes, more taxes than your CEOs and the corporations that we work for.
Mm-hmm.
And you still have starving children in the UK because our taxes instead go to line the pockets of certain people that get given certain contracts, and also bombing democracy into the Libyans because we need to do that.
First of all, the House of Lords need their allowances.
Exactly. They gotta get their
How
money.
dare you? How dare you?
How insensitive.
You wanna let some life kid go without his fur hood because you want to starve some little rat on the street.
You want to feed. You're the one starving.
You want to give him a lollipop or some shit. You know?
I don't think feeding children should come at the expense of, sir or lord, whatever it may be.
Hancock spending 50 grand on takeaway for his affair. Let's admit it.
Those eyebrows, man. Like they need to be on for every penny counts.
Bro,
She
spent how much? She spent how much?
77K.
Bro, her eyebrows are dead. That's what I'm pissed off about.
We will not body shame. Although I agree, but we will not body shame.
Bro,
We're not body shaming. We're
it's-
shaming the skills of her eyebrow, ladies.
Okay, fair enough.
But get tying it back to
know,
the original point, you know.
It's like if your barber fucks up, and if your barber fucks up, you gotta violate a little bit.
Nah, fair enough.
No, it's true. But like, just
Go
getting
ahead.
back to the point, I think there is a difference then between morality and the choice we make. Like people can make shit decisions. People can make mistakes. People can just do the objectively shit thing to do, right? But like when you're talking about like making decisions for society, like should that be a death sentence? You know what I mean? And I think that's a really important question. And also, again, though, you can't divorce that conversation without dialing it back and also talking about the histories and the context that have led up to that situation happening. When you're talking about, I don't know, like maybe a woman who comes, lives in a small apartment or something, choosing to have children or maybe more children than she might have the resources to take on. Like, I think there's also questions of, okay, why is she in that situation where she doesn't have enough resources to take on the amount of children she wants to have? Why, and it's like there's like these questions then about how wealth is distributed, how our housing system works, how women are raised and educated. I mean, there's other like ideas about society, and there's other like stories and narratives you need to look into before we start saying, okay, this woman, her kids shouldn't be fed just because she made what we'd say are bad choices. You know what I mean?
Hey,
and
you
like
had
they can
more
be
than
bad
2 kids.
choices. You know what I mean? But they can be objectively bad choices. But what, you know what I mean? Like, are we trying to be punitive? Or, like what is the approach then afterwards? And again, you can chastise someone, but also mean help, like like what people were saying, and even like Ozzy was saying, like, yeah, you can make it clear that wasn't the right decision. Like things like claiming benefits or universal credit, like that, they're really embarrassing things to do. Like objectively, there's a lot of taboo around that anyway. But also just like the process of going to a place, having your life scrutinized by like a government bureaucrat, and then deciding, like, that's soul crushing. Or like applying for refugee status, or dealing with the immigration system, like that shit. Like even if you want to encourage people to do the right thing, like it's still a really like soul crushing experience. Like it shapes you, and you make it clear that you're not liked or wanted. And I think it's just really interesting when talking about them political decisions of how people can be so harsh when you think about that, because of how we're taught to view people in that situation, and again, without understanding the circumstances that meant that situation came to be.
Yeah, I think the it literally boils down your life into, and again, stripping away the human aspect, stripping away the emotion, stripping away everything that makes you, to tick boxes on a form, right? And like it's almost as if people want people to say, all right, you know what, we will help you, but you know what, you got 5 kids, so we'll give you enough food to feed 4. Pick which one starves, because we're not going to give you any more.
Rotation.
No, just pick, because then you put all of them at risk. So just pick one that you just neglect, in it. Just fully, like,
Just like Monday, Timmy doesn't get to eat.
Exactly. Well, this is my point. Like people move like, and I love it when like people say, well, this is what happens in the animal kingdom. It's like, yeah, but we live in a society. We're not animals. Like I
It's
get
the nature, man. Like, listen, if they debated a little bit more, if they went to that debate, they would have learned to not resort to those kind of fallacies.
they should listen to this podcast.
Exactly. Seeing as we're saying, we talked extensively about debate not being the right format for a lot of issues, and then I think the one time you've cited where debate would be good was for something that was like comedic. So yeah, is that where we're saying debate should reside, only for entertainment purposes, for comedy?
I don't personally think so. No, I think people have been debating for millennia, right? I'm trying to think of a debate that's like predates
like
Socrates in ancient Greece.
Exactly, right.
Give me an
There's
example of debates that you agree. Yeah,
renationalization of the railways. Perfect, legit. I think that's a perfect legitimate debate to have, because no one, and even though I kind of see why people's lives do depend on this, no one's gonna die if we don't renationalize the railways. From my perspective, right?
Would you prefer that to be a debate, or would you prefer it to be a discussion as to?
I think
what
that could be a
should be
debate
best?
because renationalizing the railways is an ideological conversation to have. And ultimately, I don't think the people that would be involved in that conversation could divorce themselves from their perspectives. Is that they like, usually people in these conversations, they've already made up their minds. And that's the issue with debate. I think what that debate would service is the undecided, right? That's the purpose that I would say. It's that if someone can make a strong enough argument to why renationalizing the railways would be a better thing to do, or why keeping them private is the better thing to do, I think that would be our democracy in action. The issue is making sure that fact checkers are on scene, because as we saw in 2019 when Jeremy Corbyn was debating Boris Johnson, the Tory Twitter was changed to Fact Check UK, but it was still the same Twitter. In that campaign, someone the Tories had made a fake manifesto, Labour manifesto, put it under a very obvious labourmanifesto.com thing, and then paid for it to be the first option that comes up on Google, right? And I think when and that's my issue, is that the debate itself is then poisoned when shady tactics start happening. And I think that's my issue with why we shouldn't be debating on people's lives, because I think people are going to be pulling those shady tactics, and we can't afford to have the undecided making the wrong decision in those situations. Yeah. They can make the wrong decision with the renationalization of the railways, because you can undo that. That's an economic decision. Money will come back. You can't do it with whether or not this person who can't afford healthcare gets ignored by doctors, because that person will die and you can't undo that.
Enough money I can make sometimes.
Decisions.
What I'll say, what I got from that with the question, my question was, essentially, you agreed with the debate because it was a situation where both parties held the ideas strongly and were passionate about them, but the effects of either side winning were low risk in terms of overall suffering, if you will. So it's almost like we're saying that a debate should be for something where two sides feel strongly about something, but the end result of either side winning is low risk to either party. And I think if there's another type of area where we should be having debates and not discussions.
No, I think, funny enough, actually, Ozzy, I feel like you'd be surprised. I actually don't have an answer for you. I think there is, like, at the end of the day, there probably isn't a better way to like hash out these really, really important decisions and questions other than a debate. Like, I think in truth, like, it's necessary. But I think the way I'm approaching it, and the reason I don't like debate, is because of, again, kind of the deliberate framing of what it can kind of do. But I don't think that's a product of debate itself as a concept. I think it's more about what
use it.
it's and just how it's used as well. Like, listen, we live in an unequal world, so at the end of the day, the people having these discussions, like, or the discussions that will take place, will probably perpetuate that inequality or the systems that have created it, like, just by nature. You know what I mean? I think when we live in a world like that, like, I feel like there isn't really an alternative other than, you know, having one person make every decision, which is obviously worse. Like, I think, or
serve the Soviet Union.
Yeah, but not, but like, but it comes down to it. Like, yeah, debate is useful, but like, it's about what debates are taking place and how are we debating. And I think for me, that's why I'm skeptical about what debate's been turned into, how public it's become, and how it replicates and mirrors the kind of inequalities that are present in society as a whole. Like,
it becomes sensationalized, isn't it?
Yeah, like, I mean, you can't get rid of debate. That's the thing. It's just, I think the only thing we can do now is approach it with awareness. And especially when we talk about that thing of like how debates can sort of like take these really important issues that affect loads of people and like completely miss out their voices. The one thing you can do is make sure those voices are heard in the conversation. I think that's the only way you can go about things, is having people and having that lived experience represented. Like, I don't think there's anything more you can do to improve it other than just fix everything else that's wrong with society, and the debate will fix itself.
Yeah, that's
true. What are you saying? Commit the actions and then the results of those actions will then speak for themselves.
Well, yeah, because like again, it's that whole thing about objectivity, right? There's no such thing. It's just that a subjectivity that everyone subconsciously agreed on.
Well,
You know, so I feel like until you change the conditions that allow that debate to happen, you're never really going to get rid of
a good example of
the
that.
issues of debate.
I think you highlighted something interesting there, which is how debate is weaponized in, you know, not just modern society, but like over the past few hundred years. Like, you know, the famous British tactic of the empire was divide and conquer. And how do you do that? By, you know, creating two schools, opposing
Schools of thought.
Bro, I feel like every time you start spitting facts, man, it just freezes.
Listen,
It's like,
listen, man, it's the deep state, man. Again, he's talking
They
to
can
people.
hear us,
He's
they
talking
can
to
hear
you.
us.
it's the postmodernists. It's the postmodernists.
Postmodernists and their liberal agenda.
Bro, sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was just saying, like, it can be very dangerous, and I think people don't, you know, people underestimate, you know, the power of it and how it's just running amok now. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? The first thing that's coming to my mind is like, it's, you know, you disagree. People have a difference on one thing, and that's it. And I don't want to make it like, oh yeah, they have a disagreement on whether colored people are lesser than white people. You know what I mean? I mean something very small, something
Yeah,
climate that we live in right now.
Sorry, could you just repeat that last bit for me?
I'm saying that people have such this kind of, you know, I'll wait for the sirens though.
They're coming for you. That's your speaking to them.
They can hear me.
I thought they came in black helicopters.
Yeah.
SWAT team breaks down the door.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Yeah, I was just saying that, like, you know, we live in such a hostile climate where people kind of stop talking to people over the smallest bit of debate because of their egos, and because it's so powerful, and because it puts people in such powerful and powerless positions, and it's, you know, I think it's quite dangerous, man.
100%, because, and again, this goes back to Behind the Curve. This documentary, you guys need to watch it.
Yeah.
They speak
Netflix.
about how, yeah, it's on Netflix.
I'll give it a watch.
I'll post a link. How exactly what you just said there, people stop talking to each other. And I think that then leads to a very, very dangerous situation where a group of minds just get, and they say it in the show, they get pushed to the fringes of society to just mutate and stagnate. And the thing is, with those kinds of things, like there's an interview they do with one guy who's like, oh yeah, I've just finalized the divorce. I no longer talk to my parents, my brother, or pretty much anyone who isn't interested in doing truth research. And it's like, my guy, you need friends outside of this, right? And this is the whole point of the echo chamber, is that the shock that like genuinely, I actually felt a sense of hope. I allowed myself to feel a sense of hope in 2019 general election that we were going to back Corbyn, but I wasn't shocked at the result. But so many of the people around me were, and I just realized it's because we don't talk to people who aren't like us, right? I'm not saying everyone's like that. I'm not saying all of us agree. We've created a little echo chamber here because we kind of all agree and come from similar points of view on this. But I know for a fact we don't all agree on everything, right? But the thing is, when we engage in conversations, it's exactly what the point is. It's a discussion. It's to come to a new conclusion, or it's just to better understand your point of view on something, rather than winning. And I think that's another issue with debate, is when you draw lines in the sand, you find out that you're actually on the same side as people you actually don't agree with either, right? Michael Moore made a documentary about climate change, and literally the only solution they made in that was mass die-off, allow a bunch of people to die. And I'm like, yo, I'm too busy fighting the guy that's saying climate change doesn't exist. I don't even realize what this guy's saying. And this is my point. When we're constantly debating, constantly legitimizing this point of view, we don't get to step up to the next rung to the next section of the conversation because you're too busy legitimizing the point of view that's just wrong. Right? And that's because more people just back that they don't know who to back, right? They don't know, and that's why people don't go on to the next part of the conversation. We shouldn't be having conversations about whether or not climate change exists. We should be having a conversation like to answer your question from before, Ozzy, the legitimate conversation there is, should we be backing wind power or solar energy? Not does it exist?
Yeah.
That's the point. That was a very long-winded way of saying that. I don't know why it just came to my head there. But yeah, and to your question, how do we deal with this? I think you were saying, how do we deal with issues that need to be, debated, because how else do we solve society? I think a great solution would just be, give me all the power, I'll sort everyone out.